The Young and the Restless Spoilers. Sharon felt the room close in on her when she heard Sienna mention the name Mitch. It was a name she had not spoken aloud in more than 2 decades, a name that once belonged to a man who had changed the course of her life, and whose shadow she believed had long since disappeared. But as the sound of that name echoed through her memory, something in her heart tightened. It was not Mitch. It was Matt. Mitch was only an alias, one she had forced herself to forget. The moment Sienna's words left her lips, Sharon felt the ground beneath her shift. She knew this was not a coincidence. Fate had a cruel sense of timing, and now it had placed the past directly in her path, when she least expected it and least desired it. In that instant, she understood the real danger was not only the memories she had buried, but the possibility that someone else might dig them up and expose everything she had fought to conceal. That night, the sterile silence of Noah's hospital room became unbearable. The beeping of the machines and the faint hum of the lights felt like a slow countdown to a reckoning. Sharon sat at her son's bedside, her hand resting lightly on the blanket, her thoughts thousands of miles away in a memory she could not suppress. She remembered the scent of the woods outside Genoa City, the sound of her laughter when she was still young and reckless, and the way Matt's eyes looked when he promised her that someday they would leave everything behind. But promises meant nothing against time. What they had shared was destroyed by choices, betrayals, and the cruel passage of years. She had convinced herself that the man she once knew had disappeared into the same silence that swallowed her mistakes. Yet now, he was here, standing in the same world as her once again, hiding behind another name, another face, another story. Matt had changed. The world had carved its lines into his face, but Sharon recognized the same mixture of tenderness and danger in his expression. When he saw her across the corridor, his breath caught. 20 years dissolved in an instant, leaving only the raw shock of recognition. He had not expected to find her like this, vulnerable yet composed, standing by her grown son's hospital bed like a ghost from his own unfinished past. Every instinct in him told him to go to her, to close the distance and speak her name the way he used to, but something in her posture warned him to stay back. The old fire between them had not died, it had merely been buried under layers of guilt and time. The weight of what they once were pressed against the air between them, a silent admission that some emotions, no matter how long suppressed, never truly fade. That evening, unable to bear the storm inside him, Matt asked to see her. He knew it was reckless. He knew that reopening old wounds would only lead to pain, but he also knew that silence would destroy him faster. The years apart had not erased her from his mind, they had only turned her memory into an obsession, a heartbeat that refused to die. When he finally stood outside Noah's room, his reflection on the glass made him hesitate. He saw in himself both the boy who had loved her and the man who had lost everything because of that love. As he stepped inside, the air thickened. Sharon turned, and for a moment, her composure shattered. The shock in her eyes betrayed everything she tried to suppress: recognition, longing, and fear. She spoke quietly, but the tremor in her voice was unmistakable. They could not do this again. Too much time had passed, too many lives had been built on top of the ruins of their old one. Everyone had moved on, or at least pretended to. She reminded him that they were no longer those same people, that their world had changed. There were things they could not afford to bring back, especially now, when her son's future and her fragile peace depended on keeping the past buried. Matt's presence was like opening a wound she had spent half her life trying to close. Yet even as she said the words, her heart betrayed her. Matt listened, but the distance in her voice only fueled his desperation. He told her he had never forgotten, that the world might have changed but the way he felt had not. He remembered everything, the nights they spent dreaming of escape, the promises whispered in fear and hope, and the day she walked away from him without looking back. He carried that absence like a scar. Seeing her again now felt like a cruel miracle, a reminder of the life he might have had. He wanted to tell her that he had searched for her, that he had rebuilt his identity just to survive, that every decision he made was somehow tied to the memory of her. Sharon wanted to believe that he had changed, that the man standing before her was no longer the reckless youth who once dragged her into a world of secrets and danger. But the intensity in his eyes told her otherwise. There was still something unhealed there, a hunger, a sense of unfinished business. She had seen it before, in another lifetime, when she was too young to understand the cost of love built on chaos. Now, she understood too well. The years had not softened Matt, they had sharpened him. He spoke of love, but Sharon heard obsession. He spoke of forgiveness, but she heard the echo of a past that had nearly destroyed them both. As the night deepened, Noah stirred slightly in his sleep, unaware of the emotional storm surrounding him. Sharon moved closer to her son's bed, her protective instinct stronger than her fear. She told Matt that they could not let the past poison what little peace she had managed to rebuild. She had already lost too much: Cassie, Faith's innocence, years of quiet stability. To reopen old wounds now would be madness. But Matt was not ready to let go. He believed fate had given them a second chance, that after all the years apart, they had been brought together for a reason. He wanted to prove that what they once had was still real. Sharon turned away, trying to steady her breathing. Every word he said chipped away at her resolve. Somewhere deep down, she had imagined what it would be like to see him again, but she had always hoped it would happen in another life, one where the scars had healed and the memories had softened. Instead, here he was, the living reminder that some ghosts refuse to die quietly. She could feel the old emotion rising, colliding with the guilt of what she had become. Her life now was fragile, balanced on the thin line between redemption and relapse. Matt's return threatened to pull her back into the chaos she had fought so hard to escape. As he left that night, the tension between them hung in the air like smoke from a long-extinguished fire. Neither of them could say what they truly felt. Matt walked away, but he knew he would return. The spark had been reignited, and no amount of logic could smother it completely. Sharon watched him disappear into the corridor, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and longing. She knew this was not the end, it was only the beginning of something that could either redeem or destroy them both. In the days that followed, Sharon's thoughts became a battlefield. She tried to focus on Noah's recovery, on the routines that kept her grounded, but every quiet moment was invaded by memories of Matt, his voice, his touch, his promises. The more she tried to suppress them, the more vivid they became. She started seeing him in places she knew he wasn't, feeling his presence in the spaces between her thoughts. It frightened her, not because she still loved him, but because she wasn't sure she didn't. She hated herself for even wondering what might have been. Meanwhile, Matt watched from a distance, torn between restraint and desire. He knew he had already disrupted her fragile peace, but he couldn't stop himself. Every time he saw her, in the hallway, at the cafe, by the hospital window, he was reminded that the love they once shared had never truly died. It had only gone dormant, waiting for a single spark to return. Yet he also sensed that the past they shared held darker secrets than Sharon was willing to confront. There were things left unsaid, sins never confessed, and people who would not forgive if the truth came out. As the autumn air settled over Genoa City, Sharon realized that the past was not finished with her. Y&R Matt had returned not merely as a man, but as a consequence. His reappearance was a test of everything she had learned, every boundary she had built. And though she told herself she would resist, deep inside, she knew the story was far from over. Some love stories do not end with closure. They end with reckoning. And when Sharon closed her eyes that night, she could still hear his voice, whispering through the years, reminding her that the heart never forgets what it once surrendered, no matter how much time has passed. When Sienna's words reached him, Y&R Matt stopped hiding. For years he had carried a secret that grew heavier with every breath. Noah was his son. Sharon's son. The boy whose birth had rewritten his fate while he stood outside the circle of her new life, watching from a distance as Nick raised what was his by blood. He had told himself that silence was mercy, that Sharon deserved peace and that the boy deserved stability. But seeing Sharon again, seeing Noah pale and fragile in that hospital bed, cracked open everything he had buried. He no longer saw reason in pretending. He wanted what was his, and he wanted the world to know it. Sharon felt the storm gather long before he said a word. She saw it in his eyes, the same stubborn fire that had once drawn her in and nearly destroyed her. Matt wanted to expose everything, to reclaim his name and the years he believed were stolen. But she understood better than anyone the devastation that truth could unleash. Nick's world would shatter, Noah's sense of self would fracture, and everything she had built to protect her family would collapse. The lie that had sustained them had also trapped her, and now it was tightening around her like a noose. She remembered the day she made that choice, the day she realized she was pregnant and Nick stood beside her ready to give her the future Matt never could. She had convinced herself she was doing the right thing, for the child, for stability, for survival. But every good intention had a cost, and that cost had finally come due. Matt refused to accept that what they had shared could be rewritten out of existence. He had watched Sharon build a life of order and calm, pretending the past was gone, and he could not forgive that silence. He told himself he was here for the truth, but beneath that moral conviction was something darker, a need for acknowledgement, for revenge disguised as justice. He had lost 2 decades of fatherhood, of birthdays and first steps and every ordinary miracle, while another man claimed those moments as his own. Each memory of Noah's childhood that he had been denied burned in him like a slow poison. To him, revealing the truth was not destruction, it was reclamation. To Sharon, it was ruin. In her mind, she saw the aftermath, Nick's face when he realized that everything he had built his family upon was a lie. The betrayal would not end with anger, it would turn into something far worse. He would hate her, despise her, and that hatred would bleed into every corner of their lives. The fragile peace that had allowed them to coexist, to co-parent, to still call themselves a family, would be obliterated. Sharon knew Nick's temper, his pride, his deep sense of loyalty. Once that was broken, there would be no forgiveness. And worse, Noah would be caught between 2 fathers, forced to question every memory, every lesson, every ounce of affection he had ever known. She could not bear to watch her son's heart fracture under the weight of their sins. She pleaded with Matt to stop, to let the past stay buried. Her voice trembled, not with fear for herself but for what would come after. The truth, she said, would not heal anyone, it would destroy them all. But Matt was no longer the man who once dreamed of running away with her. Time had hardened him. The loneliness, the bitterness, the years of silence, they had transformed love into vengeance. He believed that by revealing everything, he was setting himself free. He did not see that in doing so, he was condemning them both. Night fell over Genoa City, thick and heavy. Sharon sat alone in her living room, the glow of the fireplace flickering against the walls. The memories played through her mind like old film reels, Matt's laughter, his reckless promises, the way he held her when the world seemed too cruel to survive. She had loved him once with a kind of desperation that only youth could afford. But that love had led her into darkness, betrayal, loss, and a guilt she could never erase. When she chose Nick, she had done so not because she stopped loving Matt, but because she could no longer live on the edge of chaos. Nick had been safety, solidity, redemption. Yet safety required silence, and silence was now devouring her. Meanwhile, Matt stood outside, watching the light through the window. Every fiber in him screamed to walk in, to tell Noah the truth, to look his son in the eyes and say, "I am your father." He rehearsed the words in his mind until they became a mantra. But beneath that determination lurked a trace of doubt. Would Noah hate him for waiting so long? Would Sharon's pleas echo in his conscience once the truth was out? He told himself that truth was pure, but purity had never been part of their story. They were creatures of secrecy and consequence. Still, he turned away from the window with his jaw set. He would not let her manipulate him again. The next morning, he vowed everything would change. Sharon's mind did not rest. She thought of the ripple effect, the media frenzy, Victor Newman's intervention, the family's wrath, the humiliation that would follow. She imagined Noah's confusion, the questions he would ask, the resentment he might feel toward her for choosing deceit over honesty. Each scenario ended the same, devastation. And yet, as she sat there, part of her wondered if she deserved the exposure, if maybe truth was the punishment she had evaded for too long. Her entire life had been a cycle of love and loss, of hiding from her own mistakes. Perhaps this was fate demanding balance. But then she thought of Noah's smile, his kindness, the life he had built, and she knew she could not let Matt destroy that innocence. The following day, Matt confronted her again. There was no warmth left in his eyes, only resolve. He spoke of honesty, of setting things right, of giving Noah the father he deserved. Sharon's heart broke with every word. She told him that Noah already had a father, that love was not measured in blood but in years of presence and sacrifice. Nick had been there when Matt had not, and for all his flaws, Nick had given their son the stability she could not. But Matt refused to hear it. In his mind, Sharon's defense of Nick was another betrayal, another theft of what should have been his. When she begged him to stop, to think about what he was doing, her voice cracked. He looked at her and saw not the woman he had loved, but the one who had taken his child and his future. The confrontation left her shaking. Every instinct screamed that something terrible was coming. Matt was not a man who made idle threats. His determination was dangerous, his emotions volatile. If he went public, the fallout would be irreversible. Sharon knew she had to make a choice. Confess before he did or find a way to silence him. The idea of lying once more made her sick, yet the truth felt even deadlier. Her world had become a trap of her own making, no exit, only consequences. As she stood by the window that night, she saw his car parked across the street, waiting. Watching. The past had not only returned, it was hunting her. She whispered a single plea into the darkness, that he would show mercy, that love, whatever was left of it, might stop him. But deep down, she knew mercy had long since died between them. Matt wanted recognition, and if he could not have it through love, he would take it through destruction. Sharon felt the inevitable closing in like a tide. The truth was coming, and when it did, it would tear through Genoa City like a storm. Somewhere inside her, a question burned: would the world condemn her for her deceit, or would it understand the unbearable price she had paid to protect her son? The answer would come soon, carried by the man who once loved her enough to burn the world down in her name.